Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well again. Gonna have another little short sermon here, and today I'm gonna be reading a little bit from Luke again. I'll hit a verse or two from Matthew, and then one or two from John to just tie everything all together with what I'm saying. And so there's a lot of people who say, well, how can we adhere to Jesus's commands? How can we adhere to God's commands? And so in the Old Testament, the Hebrew people, the way they did that, the way they were justified was by the law of Moses. Their adherence to that law was their justification. They had to follow it. And so, Jesus speaks about the law in his earthly ministry, and some people get a little confused about this topic, and rightfully so, because they want to do what Jesus is saying. It comes from sincerity, but they might be misunderstanding exactly how to do that. And so, with that being said, I'm gonna read here from Luke, and then we'll go to Matthew, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So this is Luke chapter 24, verse 44. And to set the stage here, this is actually, Jesus has been resurrected at this point. He's appeared to the disciples right in their midst, as they're having a meal. And he gives them a little message, and so we'll read that. Verse 44. And Jesus, he said unto them, These are the words which I spoke unto you, while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the Scriptures. So you got a couple things going on right there. So it finished with the point specifically that the disciples, even though they followed Jesus on his earthly ministry for 3 years and heard every intimate word he said, he told them secrets like a friend that he didn't tell everybody. But they still, until that moment, they didn't really understand any of it, because they were bound to the law. And what Jesus was bringing forth was fulfillment of the law. So until that law of Moses and the prophets was fulfilled, they literally couldn't understand it. And so that's an interesting thing to think about. So I'll flip over to Matthew real quick, and I'll read the verses there that associate with this, that people often get confused to think that they should still adhere to the law of Moses. So we'll just flip there real quick. We'll go Matthew chapter 5, verses 18 and 19. Okay, verse 18. For truly I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever, therefore, shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So that sounds confusing in a certain way. It seems like it's contradicting what Jesus said in Luke, but it's actually not. Because you have to understand who he was talking to. He hadn't been crucified yet. He hadn't been resurrected. He was talking specifically to the Jewish disciples who were justified and bound to the law until all things were fulfilled. So teaching any Jewish person to not follow the law until Jesus was crucified and resurrected was against God. But that law and those prophets were fulfilled specifically by Jesus' sacrifice, and then his recalling it. He says it specifically when he gives the disciples true understanding, because now everything has been fulfilled and they're no longer bound to that law. And so it's as simple as that, really. But that brings us to another important thing. So the entire Old Testament is filled with sacrifice. That's how they adhered to the law. The law was wrapped around personal sacrifice of your goods, your time. We're still meant to sacrifice. It's how we honor Jesus. We don't sacrifice blood anymore because Jesus was the final atonement for the blood sacrifice. We sacrifice now in spirit and in truth. And that being said, we're going to back that up. I'm just going to go over to John chapter 4 real quick. John 4, verse 24. Jesus is talking specifically to the disciples. I'll start on verse 23. But the hour comes, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks such to worship him. He's not looking for ritual practice anymore. He's looking for integrity. Something you want to do. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So there it is. God never expected you to stop sacrificing for him. What he's asking for now in this new dispensation of time under the new covenant is for people to do it willingly. And our conscience guides us along that path. It's a little gift that God gave to us and wrote on our hearts. But it's how we can actually bring acceptable sacrifice to the Lord is through spirit and truth. And so Jesus, he absolutely expects us to give things up in our life. That's the sacrifice. Because in every economy, God's and man, you have to give to get. It's only reasonable. And it's why we actually see a lot of dissatisfaction culturally, because there's a lot of people that know on their heart that it's just not right to get things that you haven't worked for. But we do have a lot of people who often end up receiving things on the back of another's hard work. Now, that's a sacrifice that's reasonable for that person who's capable. But it doesn't make the person who's unwilling to work innocent. It doesn't justify them consuming the sacrifices of others. So let's just do what we can to worship God in truth and in spirit, which means you're going to have to get a little tough on yourself. You're going to have to sacrifice. You're going to have to give up things in your personal life to get things. If you want to find peace through the storm, you're going to have to give things up. It's just the way Jesus commands us to do it. I mean, after all, he was our example, and he gave everything up. He didn't have a home. He didn't have food in his belly routinely. He had a lot of people standing against him. And then the ultimate sacrifice was that he gave his life away for us. And not only did he give it away, he gave it away in the most brutal fashion you could imagine. So we can see what real sacrifice looks like. Our example, our model to follow. And so, sacrifice, it's painful, but it's necessary. You have to let the fire burn off some of that slag. So you can be that person in Malachi chapter 3 that God talks about. He's like a finer sitting at the furnace. And he dips in the silver and he heats it up and he looks for that slag to rise to the top and drop away. And he looks until he can see his own image in that pure metal, that pure element. That's what God's doing. He's burning off the slag, but it comes by sacrifice. So let's thank God for that path to purity, and let's embrace our path to sacrifice. Hope everyone has a great day. Oh, I got a slow connection. They're not going to let me finish up my video, so you're just going to hang with me. There it is. Take care, everybody.